True Crime Brewery contains disturbing content related to real-life crimes. Medical information is opinion based on facts of a crime and should not be interpreted as medical advice or treatment. Listener discretion is advised.
Welcome to True Crime Brewery. I'm Jill.
And I'm Dick.
It was in February 2010 when Joseph McStay, his wife Summer, and their young sons Gianni and Joseph Jr. disappeared from their Fallbrook, California home. Days later, their SUV was found abandoned in a parking lot near the Mexican border. A dark and fuzzy surveillance video was released, which seemed to show a family matching their descriptions walking across the border into Mexico. The media speculated about reasons why the family would leave everything behind, as McStay family and friends swore that was just impossible. Then, in 2013, the disappearance became a homicide investigation. But who would be evil enough to kill an entire family, including a 3- and 4-year-old? And what could the motive possibly be? Join us at the Quiet End today for Betrayed and Buried. We're taking you back to February 4th, 2010, as we follow the McStay family's story, all the way from their mysterious disappearance to the trial of their killer. What's our beer today, Dick?
Today's beer is My Bloody Valentine from AleSmith Brewing Company in San Diego. I chose this just because we're coming up to Valentine's Day, and I thought it was kind of an appropriate beer.
Well, it sounds pretty good, too.
So this is an American Amber or Red Ale. Its alcohol by volume is 6.66%.
Is that on purpose?
Yes.
Okay, so it's probably not totally accurate.
It's a dark reddish-brown color, small tan head, tiny bit of lace, nice aroma, bread, chocolate, some floral hops. Taste is pretty good too, chocolate, toasted bread, a little bit of hops late, medium-bodied beer. Nothing spectacular, but very nice anyway.
And I'd just like to say the bottle is interesting and attractive. A lot of character to the bottle design.
For sure.
Yeah. All right, let's open it up. I'm willing to give it a try.
Well, I think you'll like it.
Okay, down to the quiet end, and I brought along some dark chocolate to go along with the whole Valentine theme.
Good.
Yeah. So, once you finish that big piece of chocolate, you can go ahead and start our story. Have a sip of beer and get going.
Okay, I'm almost ready. There we go. So the McStay family had recently moved into their new house on a nice cul-de-sac in Fallbrook, California. That's at the time they had disappeared. They had relocated from a beachside apartment in San Clemente. Joey and Summer McStay had been making plans and working on home renovations when they stopped responding to texts and phone calls on February 4th, 2010. Joseph was 40. He owned and operated earth-inspired products, and this was a business that designed and installed water fountains. It had been Joey's dream to be self-employed in order for him to spend as much time as possible with his sons, Gianni, age 4, and Joseph Jr., age 3. Joey's wife, Summer, was a licensed real estate agent. She had taken some time off in order to be a stay-at-home mother.
Yeah, and to work on the house, because there was a lot of work to be done there.
Yeah, they had big plans for this house.
They did. Joey and Summer had each been married once before when they met, and according to friends, they fell in love quickly, and they were just crazy about each other and quite happy. So let's go into Summer and Joey's histories a bit, just to get a better understanding of who they were as people and who they were as a couple before this all happened. So Joey's birth name was Joseph Allen Ashley. His mother, Susan, married his biological father, Robert Ashley, right out of high school. But the marriage just didn't last very long at all. Susan then met Patrick McStay in 1971, and Patrick was quite happy to take over as Joey's father. He and Susan married in 1972. They were married, and Patrick adopted Joey with Robert Ashley's permission, which I found pretty interesting. And with this adoption, Joey's name was legally changed to Joseph Brian McStay. Then in 1973, Joey's brother Michael was born. And Joey was a doting big brother who really loved to help out with Michael's care. But unfortunately, Patrick and Susan's marriage didn't last long either, and they divorced in 1975. And they would continue to have some back and forth issues over the years. Although Susan remarried and maintained custody of Joey and Michael, the two boys did continue to spend time with their father, Patrick. And for a while in his teens, Joey went to live with his dad in Dallas, Texas. So according to Patrick, the father, he was very close with Joey. A very good relationship.
Yeah, that is, because it's an adopted kid.
Right.
Right? But they had a very good relationship.
Well, I mean, he came in pretty early in Joey's life, so there wasn't a lot of, arguing back and forth about anything. Not a lot of that, you're not my real father stuff.
Right. Now, Joey met his first wife, Heather, in 1990, and they got married in 1992. In 1996, they had a son. Now, Joey and Heather lived in San Clemente, near the beach. Heather's father was pretty wealthy. He owned a jewelry store in Laguna Beach, where he really liked Joey, and he helped give his daughter just an absolutely beautiful wedding. Now, before he met and married Heather, Joey had had several jobs. He worked as a waiter and a bartender. He also started his own small business, designing and selling products. Now, later, he began designing small waterfalls and fountains in his garage. He borrowed a little bit of money from his father and opened a shop, which he called Naturally Dana Point. And by late 1996, he was quite successful. He had made over $200,000 in sales. Then he brought in his brother Michael and opened Naturally DP Fountains, with a leased warehouse for production. So he's starting to move up a little bit here, huh?
Yeah, very hard worker, very motivated. But Heather and Joey's marriage fell apart, and he found out that Heather was having an affair, and she had become pregnant by her lover. But still, he kind of blamed himself, at least in part, because he'd been working a lot, so he wasn't spending much time with her. He tried to work things out. He even told Heather that he would happily raise the new baby as his own. But it was too late. Heather was already in love with this other guy, and she decided on a divorce. But apparently this was devastating to Joey. He was still in love with Heather. So he was pretty heartbroken and depressed, and he moved in with his mom. And according to her, he went through months and months of depression. He and his brother Michael continued to run the fountain business, though, and eventually they got together with a computer expert named Dan Cavanaugh. Dan helped them build a website so they could begin doing their business as Earth-inspired products online. So people could go online and order fountains. So this really opened up things for them. Then Joey did meet Summer. That was in 2004. They were introduced by Joey's friend, who was named MacGyver. So I don't know.
That MacGyver.
Yeah, I don't know if his parents liked the TV show. It's a strange name choice, isn't it?
A bit.
Yeah. So Summer was just breaking up with her longtime boyfriend, Vic, and Joey and Summer's relationship moved fast. But she was worried about how Vic was going to react to her being with someone new so soon. She did own a house with Vic and had to go through the legalities of getting her name off of the property and the mortgage and getting some money out of that. So Summer was a bit eccentric. And she had been known by more than one name. So this would end up causing a lot of speculation after the family's disappearance, like what was going on with her. She was born Virginia Lisa Aranda, and had also been known as Summer Martelli, Summer Aranda Martelli, Lisa Aranda, and Lisa Martelli. Summer's mom raised her and her two siblings on her own as a single mom in both California and Chicago. And according to Summer's mother, Martelli was the surname of Summer's stepdad. Now, another thing that Summer did that would lead some people to question things was that she was also known to have taken some years off of her age when speaking to people. But there's no evidence that she used this new birth date on any legal documents. Family members, including her sister, have insisted that her name changes were just her own preference, and it wasn't anything to avoid any legal entanglements. She was just the kind of person who wanted to make up her own name. She wanted to live in California and be named Summer.
And she did.
She did it.
So Summer gave birth to Joey's first son, Gianni, in 2005. And then less than 2 years later, Joseph Jr. was born. Now, Summer had an aversion to hospitals, and both boys were delivered at home. Now, shortly after Joseph Jr. was born, Joey and Summer got married, and this was a small ceremony in Orange County. But Summer's side of the family didn't attend. She didn't seem very close to her family, and this worried Joey's mother. So the night before the wedding, Summer had called her family and asked them not to come to the wedding. And Joey's mom, Susan, was never quite sure why Summer had done that.
No, but it seems like Joey knew why. He wasn't questioning it. So, there were issues, but what family doesn't have issues, really?
Well, yeah, I mean, there's issues and there's issues.
Right. And these were a little extraordinary, I guess. But who knows what was going on. And it was a small second marriage, so maybe it wasn't a big deal. Having family there is a bigger deal to some people than others.
Well, I would put that as a priority. I'd like to have my family at my wedding.
Of course.
Right?
Yeah, but not all my family came to my wedding.
Well, the important ones did.
Oh, okay. Well, according to a lot of people, though, Summer was very jealous of Joey's first wife. Joey and Heather shared custody of their son, Jonah. Joey's friends and family said that Summer was very caring to Jonah, even though she wasn't always thrilled with Heather. Summer did complain to her sister Tracy that Heather would barge into their house regularly, even walking in when Joey's in the shower. Kind of weird. And she would drop off Jonah without calling ahead and just kind of expect Summer to babysit. So Summer was trying to get along, and she put up with it at first, but eventually she told Joey that she was going to have to break up and leave if he didn't set some boundaries with the ex-wife. Now, to me, that seems totally reasonable.
Well, it does to me, too.
Yeah.
I'm not just a walk-in or drop-off daycare.
Right.
Yeah,
and you're not married to him anymore, so what are you walking into the house for as if you live here?
Yeah, get out of my house.
Yeah.
Get off of my yard.
That's right. So I totally get that. I mean, it's a territorial thing, if nothing else. Plus, it's disrespectful. Very disrespectful to Summer and to Summer and Joey's relationship. Maybe not the best thing for Jonah to see either.
Possibly not. Now, the McStays lived in a little two-bedroom apartment near the ocean. They really loved being near the water. Joey was a surfer, and Summer loved to walk on the beach, and take the boys also for walks on the beach.
Well, the boys were so cute. I mean, especially the older one had that surfer look, the long curly hair like his dad. Just beautiful boys.
Yeah, they were.
Yeah.
So the McStays decided to buy a house as an investment, and also to have more room for their family of 4. Unfortunately, they found the prices of coastal property to be out of their price range. So they made the decision to move inland, and this was nearby Fallbrook, California. And in Fallbrook, they were able to buy a nice home in the $300,000 range. It did need some renovating. They were handy enough to be able to do that.
Well, sure, and I think the renovations were part of making money, like an investment. They would fix up the house and sell it, and eventually they would buy a house near the water. I mean, that was the long-range plan, because they both did like to live near the water.
That's what they wanted to do.
But it was still a lovely neighborhood. There were avocado trees around, it was a cul-de-sac. I mean, there was certainly nothing wrong with it. It was beautiful. So in the months prior to their disappearance, Joey had this undiagnosed illness. He had been complaining of dizziness and extreme vertigo. And it was so bad that he sometimes couldn't even drive. He'd have to call to get a ride home when he was out at a job or something. And he had seen doctors, but nothing was really helping. Back in July of 2009, when they were still living in San Clemente, Joey was so dizzy that he asked Summer to drive him to the ER. And Summer took him to the hospital, bringing the children along. But Summer had this real hospital phobia, and she waited in the car for hours as Joey sought treatment.
Yeah, she couldn't even go into the hospital.
So that's bizarre. I'd just like to know what happened in her past to cause this. Because I could just think giving birth at home would be no picnic either.
No.
Wouldn't be my choice.
Wouldn't be my choice.
So this was strange, and some people would definitely look back at this suspiciously, wondering if Summer had something to hide, and that's why she didn't go in. But like I said, she was just a bit unusual. She had changed her name and she had lied about her age. So Joey's family had celebrated her 33rd birthday in July, but she was actually 43. So that's a big 10-year bump.
That's a bit of a boost here, you know?
Yeah, and her birthday wasn't even in July either. It was in December. So it seems like there were some things in Summer's childhood that had kind of messed her up a bit, that made her have to kind of adapt in unusual ways in adulthood. So she was actually 3 years older than Joey, but according to Joey's mom, none of them would have had a problem with her being older than Joey, so it was just a strange thing to lie about. But Joey's close friend, MacGyver, whose incidentally his last name was McCarger, so MacGyver, said that Joey knew Summer's real age before they even became seriously involved, so it wasn't an issue. I guess it was just something that Summer was worried Joey's family would judge her about and not like her as much.
Now, things weren't perfect in their relationship, but
No.
Joey and Summer did get married in November of 2007. Summer had asked her family not to attend. There was apparently some drama between her and her mother and brother. But she did have a few friends who were there for her, and Joey had many of his family members there.
And this was quite a nice wedding. I mean, it was smaller than Joey's first wedding, but it was held in nearby Rancho Cordova, California, in a beautiful spot. She wore a white gown and everything. It was a nice wedding.
That it was. After she became a mother, Summer had become a bit less social and she focused on the kids. And when they moved from San Clemente to Fallbrook, she planned to resume her career as a real estate agent. Some of Joey's friends felt like they were seeing less and less of him. But he was a new father, he was busy running his business, he had this new house they were working on, and he had a lot of things occupying his time.
Sure, but still a lot of people felt like Summer was a bit controlling and wanted him not to be going out doing things without her. So it was kind of a change in lifestyle. So just days before the family disappeared, Joey had set up an appointment with a family therapist. So there was something going on there. He'd actually talked to his mother about it. And after New Year's 2010, his mother had given him some help finding someone. And what he had told her was that he wanted to get his family back on track. So we're not sure exactly what that means.
Yeah, we don't.
But you can think about all the changes, right? Having children, getting married, moving, running a business. I mean, like you said, there's a hell of a lot going on.
Well, for sure. But we still don't know for sure what the therapist was going to be doing.
We don't. But it just doesn't seem like they were going to break up or anything. It seems like they just had some things they wanted to work on.
Right. It was like a little bump in the road.
Yeah, maybe. I mean, it's really hard to say because they never did get to go into therapy. So we don't know what they were going to work on. But, you know, I'm sure, as you've seen in your practice, having children changes a relationship.
Oh, no question.
It's a big period of adjustment.
Yeah.
And you never know how your significant other is going to act when they have a child, because all these issues from childhood, their own childhood, come back. And obviously there were a lot of issues with Summer and her childhood that she needed to address. And, you know, Joey's childhood had some issues too. Wasn't perfect.
No, that's right.
So I'm sure there was a lot to work on. So after the McStay family disappeared, the investigation would eventually focus on a welder who had worked with Joey on many of his custom fountains. So this guy's name is Charles Chase. He went by Chase Merritt. And Merritt had a criminal history, and he ended up being quite vocal in the media after the family disappeared.
It's almost like he was part of the family and was taking over as the spokesperson.
Well, he tried to act that way, didn't he? But I think he was trying to act like he was closer to them than he actually was.
Exactly.
Yeah. So a little timeline of Merritt's crimes and incarcerations will give you some idea of his history prior to working with Joey. In February of 1977, he spent 66 days in jail for burglary. Then in July of 1977, another 60 days in jail for theft. In October of 1978, criminal trespass, another 30 days in jail. Then in November of 1978, just a month later, he spent 2 years in prison for burglary. So then we have a few years where he wasn't in jail. And then in 1985, he went to jail for receiving stolen property. He spent a year in jail that time. Then February of 87, another receiving stolen property conviction and 16 more months in prison. Then May of 88, another receiving stolen property with just 14 days in jail that time. Then the month after that, when he got out of jail, he violated parole. Then a couple years without getting into trouble, and then in 2001, grand theft with 6 months in jail, as well as burglary. And also, in addition to this, he had a lengthy juvenile record. So pretty much a lifelong criminal. We can say if he's had like 10 convictions, that means he's probably committed 100 crimes. I remember reading somewhere that most criminals only get caught like 10% of the time at most. So a heavy life of crime.
Well, just when you look at this timeline of his, or his crime line, I guess you could call it, I mean, he'd have clusters of being apprehended, and then he'd go for several years. So, like, he went 13 years without being caught for anything. So, you know, he hadn't lived a life of being crime-free. He was doing stuff.
Sure, exactly. But, you know, it's noteworthy that none of these were violent crimes.
That's true.
So we don't really see him as someone who would have been violent at this point.
Not at this point.
Right.
Just career burglar.
Yeah. So why don't you go over the basic timeline for the last day the McStay family was seen or heard from on February 4th, 2010.
Okay. In the morning, Summer spoke to her sister. That's Tracy Russell. She had made plans to visit Tracy and her new son, Tanner.
Yes, I guess Tanner was a preemie and had been in the hospital for a bit. And even though Tracy hadn't come to the wedding, she and Summer talked quite frequently. And she wanted her sister Summer to come and see the baby once he got home from the hospital.
Yeah, so we're going to do that.
So I think she'd been planning that for the following weekend.
Then around noontime, Joey left the house in his Isuzu Trooper for a meeting with Chase Merritt, and this was regarding a business meeting in Rancho Cucamonga. Then at 4:25 p.m., there was an outgoing call from the McStay's home phone to Joey's cell, which pinged from the Fallbrook Tower. Now, this is the last outgoing call from the home phone. Between 5 p.m. and 5:47 p.m., text messages were exchanged between Joey's and Summer's cell phones. There wasn't anything unusual being said on this conversation. Then at 7:47 that evening, one of the neighbor's security surveillance cameras recorded a vehicle leaving the McStay street. Only the bottom part of the vehicle is visible, and occupants could not be seen. This appeared to be a white vehicle, and Joey's Isuzu was white, so possibly his car. There were no other vehicles in front of or following the car.
Yeah, and remember, they lived on a cul-de-sac, so it's not like there was passing through traffic.
Right. You can go in and then you got to turn around and come back out.
Exactly.
So at 8:28 p.m., Joey McStay's cell phone called Chase Merritt's phone. He left a voicemail. Now, Merritt would later say there was no indication of anything wrong in the message. And this cell phone message, pinged off the Fallbrook Tower. There were no other calls ever made from Joey or Summer's phones after that. Family was gone, just simply vanished.
Yes, so Joey's father, Patrick, called Joey 3 times between February 4th and February 9th from his home. He lived in Texas. Then Dan Kavanaugh, his computer guy, who was working with Joey managing the company website, contacted Patrick on February 9th because he hadn't been able to reach Joey and he was getting worried. You know, he was pretty much in contact with Joey at least once a day. So Dan was really worried that he wasn't reachable. He actually posted on Joey's Facebook page on February 6th and on February 9th that it wasn't like Joseph not to answer his calls or check his emails or to ignore incoming fountain orders. This just isn't something he would do. This was his business. He was right on top of things. You can't have a business and ignore orders for days.
Not and continue with your business.
Exactly. So Patrick called Joey's brother Michael McStay and asked him to drive out to Fallbrook and check on Joey, because Michael lived in California. But Michael at this point wasn't really concerned. He thought the family probably just took a little impromptu trip, and he told his dad that he was too busy to do it that day.
So Michael's not real concerned.
Not yet, no.
A timeline published by the San Diego Sheriff's Department showed that a business associate of Joey's had called the police on Wednesday, February 10th, to request a check on the family's welfare. There's a report by an officer who went out to the McStay house, and the report says that there is no answer at the door and no signs of foul play. Now, of course, they only checked the outside of the house. They didn't gain entry to the house. From the outside, everything looked fine.
Well, so as we get into this, Dick, I just have to say I'm not impressed with San Diego Sheriff's Department, how they handled this. And of course, neither was Patrick McStay and some of the other people that knew the McStay family. I mean, they really didn't act quickly on this at all, and they made a lot of mistakes, which I think we'll see as we go through this. Over the next few days, Michael talked on the phone daily with the welder, Chase Merritt, and Merritt said he was driving by the house daily, but nothing appeared to have changed. On February 13th, Michael drove out to the house, and he met Merritt there, and they entered the house through an open window. So what they found was a little unusual, but not really super worrisome, I guess. They found 2 small bowls of popcorn on the futon. There was a carton of eggs left out rotting in the kitchen, some other food as well. Some clothing kind of scattered on the floors. So it was kind of a mess, and there were some odd things, but at the same time, the house was in the middle of renovations. So it was very sparsely furnished, so it's kind of hard to see if things were out of place. So Michael really wasn't sure if the mess was really something he should be worried about. So Michael was not an alarmist by any means.
He definitely wasn't.
No. So he reported to his dad, Patrick, that the house was all in one piece, that his brother's pickup was still in the driveway, and that their 2 dogs were in the backyard. The shed door out back was left open, with a big bag of dog food torn open for the 2 dogs. And the dog's water bowl was moved under a water spigot with the valve slightly loosened to drip water into the bowl. So he thought that maybe Joey and Summer had taken a last-minute vacation and left these provisions for the dogs, or probably left someone in charge of looking in on the dogs. So Michael left a note for whoever was caring for the dogs, asking them to please call him because he was getting concerned about his brother and his brother's family. Now, most people who knew Summer and Joey would say this is not something they do, right? That's not what you do with your dogs.
No.
No, you find someone to be with them at least a couple times a day. You don't leave them in the yard with a bag of dry food and some water.
Yeah, exactly.
And one of them was pretty much a puppy. The other one was an older dog that Summer had had before she got married, so she was very close to that dog. They loved their dogs. So this to me would have been more alarming than it was to Michael. So it would turn out that animal control had been by and had left the food and water. An animal control officer called Michael and explained that a neighbor had called and reported the dogs had been left out without food for about a week. So the only food and water they had was what the animal control had left there, and now they were planning on taking the dogs into custody for neglect. So now I think Mike is finally getting worried.
Well, yeah, he ought to be. So Mike returned to Joey's house on Monday, February 15th, and this is 11 days after the family had last been heard of. Now this time, he called the sheriff's department. After 10 days of being missing, the case was going to be automatically treated as a homicide. But the police didn't tape off or secure the home in any way. They left the house open for anyone to access. They did lock the front door, and they went to get warrants.
So here, to me, that's incompetent.
So, yeah, there's some real problems here. I mean, the family's missing for over a week, but they're not treating the house as a possible crime scene.
Right, and it's very suspicious the way that they left, right?
Right. And then it did, with all this, it took 4 days for the police to get the warrants. So Michael, Susan, Chase Merritt, they all had access to the house during that time.
Yeah, Joey's mother, Susan, was given permission by the police to clean up the kitchen and throw away the trash because it had rotting food and dirty diapers in it, and the smell was bad. So she was in there cleaning, and she searched through papers looking for some clue, as to where her son and his family may have gone. Michael was also given permission to remove Joey's computer and the SD card from the house. He returned it before the warrant was issued, but it had already been removed from the house. Anything could have happened, really. The house wasn't treated as a crime scene as it should have been, and this was supposedly because there had been no signs of forced entry or foul play. But I think you could reasonably argue that as well.
Oh, it certainly could.
Right? Things were left out as if people left in a hurry. And we're going to find out that they really didn't take things with them that most people would need to take with them if you're leaving for any amount of time.
If you're leaving for a trip.
Sure.
Or something, yeah.
Yeah.
Now, detectives finally did send out a be on the lookout for Joey's Isuzu Trooper, and they pretty quickly got a hit. The truck had been impounded from a shopping mall near the Mexican border. So 4 days after the McStays disappeared, the truck had been parked and then eventually towed from this parking lot, and that's just yards away from the Mexican border. So now the police are wondering if the family had gone over into Mexico. But it just didn't make sense. Summer was afraid to go into Mexico because of crime. None of her family or friends believed that she had ever taken her children there. And where was the family between the 4th of February when they first disappeared and when the truck was parked there on the 8th? We have nothing.
Yeah, that doesn't make sense at all, does it?
Nope.
Now, a search of the truck found several new toys for the boys in the back. There was a large plastic kitchen set and other smaller toys. Their 2 car seats were locked into the back seat. All fingerprints found on the inside and outside of the car belonged to the McStay family members. The security camera footage from the parking lot where the Isuzu had been found showed that the car had not been parked there until February 8th, the same day it had been towed. Now, I don't know why the police didn't get any footage of who had parked it there. That seems curious to me. It seems like there was a lot of surveillance footage that they didn't get because everything was so delayed.
Yeah.
So now we have the vehicle unaccounted for 4 days after the family disappeared. And the only surveillance footage of any note to the police is from behind this family, and it's fuzzy and it's dark. So we in no way know that it's them.
No, I mean, the most you can say is that it's 2 adults and 2 kids.
Right, exactly.
And you don't have any idea, other than the possibility that the McStays had gone into Mexico. There's nothing that really suggests it's definitely them.
Well, and there's no indication that they would have a reason to do that, or that it was something that they would be willing or want to do. So soon after the truck was found, a search of the McStays' home computer showed that someone had logged into about.com on January 28th and inquired about paperwork and documents required for traveling with children into Mexico. So this really set them on that path, on that theory that the family had gone to Mexico. And Summer had also contacted someone on Craigslist about buying a Rosetta Stone Spanish language program. But I would just have to say it wouldn't be unusual, especially for someone living in California, to want to learn Spanish.
No, that wouldn't be a surprise at all.
It's commonly spoken, sure.
Yeah. Now, weeks later, when they found the surveillance video that showed what appeared to be a family of 4 walking into Mexico on the night of February 8th, this was the same day the Isuzu had been parked in a lot at the border. So the police began to investigate the possibility that the family had left the country on their own, as unlikely as that would have sounded.
Right. It seems like they weren't really paying attention to what family members thought here.
No. But then a check of documentation showed that Joey's passport was valid, but hadn't been used before or after the disappearance. The 2 boys didn't have passports. Summer did, but her passport was expired. Both the boys' birth certificates had been left behind in the family home.
Now, to me, that's huge.
Yeah, so how are we going to get the kids into Mexico without a passport or a birth certificate?
Well, or get back, right?
Right.
That would be harder. And if you're leaving, wouldn't you want those with you?
Well, certainly.
But still, police just were holding on to this idea that the family may have fled to Mexico.
Well, you almost get the impression there's kind of tunnel vision, that they're focused on this and they're not listening to anything else.
Yeah, and we've seen that with other investigations. I think there is a danger of doing that, and investigators are taught to avoid it. but sometimes they still fall into that trap.
When they were shown the video, Joey's parents, Patrick and Susan, said it was not Joey and his family. Susan argued that Joey had bushy hair, and the man in the video did not. But others weren't so sure. So in this video, that was again on February 8th, an adult male and a child were followed by an adult female and a child, and they were filmed from behind walking across the border. Despite the uncertainty of family members, the police concluded that the two adults and the two children matched descriptions of the McStay family. So to the police, the family appeared to be leaving of their own accord and didn't appear to be in any distress. Interpol issued a be on the lookout for the McStays in Mexico, but family and friends did not believe for a minute that the family was in Mexico.
Right, and there was a delay from the time the truck was parked to the time they were caught walking across the border. There was like an hour or an hour and a half in between that. So since the family had disappeared, they also had not used their credit cards or bank accounts. And they had left nearly $100,000 in their checking and savings accounts as well. So to me, that's very suspicious. Nobody's going to take off and leave their money.
Nope.
There were also no postings on their social media accounts, and there were no emails sent from either of their email accounts. Eventually, their house would go into foreclosure, and it would be sold. So Patrick McStay, Joey's dad, reached out to Tim Miller of Texas EquiSearch, a nonprofit search and rescue organization. And Miller traveled to California to look at the area and map out a search for the family. He met with Michael McStay, and he was really surprised to learn that they were permitted by the police to enter and search the house. It still hadn't been secured. So Tim Miller went in and walked through the house with Michael. He didn't see any evidence of foul play, but he saw that there was no way that the family could have left that house on their own that way. That wouldn't make sense either. I mean, like we said, they left behind all of the children's things. They left behind their stroller, their clothing, their birth certificate, even some medications. So this just didn't add up to them leaving on their own.
Yeah, so Miller's becoming convinced that something bad, or something not good anyway, had happened to the family. Now, he focused on the region between the house and the Mexican border, looking for a place where the family could have been killed and or disposed of. So he's getting into this search mode.
Well, yeah, and I think Patrick was getting his hopes up that finally someone was going to listen and help.
Yeah, but unfortunately, once Miller saw the surveillance footage of the family walking across the border, he became convinced of the police theory, and he called off the search because he decided that the McStays could have left on purpose.
So I just can't imagine the frustration of the McStays' loved ones when they feel like something happened to them and nobody's listening.
Nobody at all.
No. Very frustrating, and time is really going by. So the police at this point are convinced that the McStay family had gone to Mexico. And there were a few leads where people were calling in with sightings of the family at some restaurants in Mexico. But after a while, the leads dried up, and the case had basically just gone cold. It got to the point where years passed by with no new leads and no real investigations even being done, because there's this kind of broad assumption that the family had just left.
Yeah, without packing up or anything, they just crossed the border.
Yeah, it's really not great as a theory.
Well, there's too many holes in it, you know, and there's too many people that can contradict or refute the assertions that the police made.
Well, I mean, even if they thought that, wouldn't there be some concern that maybe the father took the family, or there was some kind of, dynamics there that were bad?
Right.
Wouldn't you want to look into why they left?
And there's no calls or texts or anything from this family.
Yeah, and leaving the money behind and everything?
Yeah. In April of 2013, the case was handed over to the FBI. They investigated, but they didn't make much progress until, that is, in November of 2013. And at this point, a 911 call came in from an off-road motorcyclist who was driving around the Mojave Desert. This was November 11th, 2013 at 9:58 in the morning. The cyclist said he'd found a human bone. So this is a pretty remote area. It's 100 miles north of the McStay home and 150 miles from the Mexico border. The graves were just 50 feet off the highway.
Yeah, so the local sheriff's department went out and found 2 shallow graves and 4 sets of skeletal remains. Each grave held 1 adult and 1 child victim. And by using dental records, the 2 adult victims were identified quite quickly as Summer and Joseph McStay. The other 2 would later be confirmed to be the 2 small boys. So it's very heartbreaking for their families, but at the same time, they kind of knew that they were dead because they knew they wouldn't be staying away like that.
Oh, yeah. So Joseph McStay's body was wrapped in a woven white blanket. He had a white extension cord wrapped around his neck, and this was tied in a knot. Around the outside of his blanket, there was a red tie-down strap that was securing the blanket over his remains. Joseph had been wearing a t-shirt, a pair of shorts, and a pair of Hanes underwear. The blanket was a woven-style cloth blanket, and it was over the extension cord, which was wrapped around his neck. It did have some kind of pattern on it, but it was falling apart because it's been there for a few years.
A dreadful find.
So the autopsy would show that Joseph had suffered a fracture of the left parietal and occipital bones. He had a fracture at the base of his skull, a fracture of the right parietal bone, a fracture of the right tibia, and a fracture of the front part of the third rib. The medical examiner believed that Joseph had at least 4 separate impacts to his skull, and these are all pre-mortem impacts.
Meaning they happened before death.
Before death. So the cause of death was felt to be blunt force trauma to the head, and the manner of death was homicide.
So I would think the other fractures of the ribs and the leg would mean that there was some kind of a fight?
Yeah, I would think that he resisted, right?
I would think so. So Summer's remains were in the second grave. She had sustained multiple fractures of her jaw, a fracture of the left parietal bone, 2 fractures of the right frontal bone, and a fracture to the parietal bone with hair embedded in it. So where's the parietal bone located?
Side of the head.
And the frontal bone, forehead.
Right.
So she also had a fracture of her left frontal bone, and the medical examiner would determine that her attacker was most likely facing her and was left-handed. As she received 2 hits to the right side of her head, she probably would have held her head down to the right, and then her attacker hit the left side of her head. This would have been the 3rd impact. So the fact that there were 2 fractures on the right front side of her head had pointed to a left-handed individual. Although Summer's jaw was fractured in multiple places, it is possible that her jaw was shattered with 1 single impact, a very powerful hit with a heavy object that likely would spin her around and would cause her to fall on the ground. So, just to sum it up, this was a brutal, very violent attack.
So there was blue painter's tape in the graves and a white shop towel, and there was paint on Summer McStay's brassiere, and there was a sledgehammer with paint on it. So this sledgehammer was felt to be the murder weapon, and Summer had been painting her kitchen during the time of her disappearance. Investigators also believe that Summer had been raped because her pants were in the grave near her head, and her panties were in the pants as if they had been pulled off together. And there was also incisions in her bra that looked as if it had been cut off of her.
Ugh. So I'm going to spare us the details of the children's attacks and deaths, but both boys did receive several blows to their heads as well. And not all the bones were found. These remains had been dug up by animals. Been a long time. After these deaths were announced, some bloggers and Facebookers surmised that Summer or Joey may have been responsible for the murders, and it was a murder-suicide. But of course the injuries didn't match that scenario at all.
Not even close, come on.
Well, I think the people that did that didn't know the details.
Well, they couldn't have.
But still, what a thing to surmise. The case was now officially a homicide investigation, and the sheriff's department was criticized for their inadequate investigation, and I'd have to say, rightly so. They really seemed to have stopped the homicide investigation back when the surveillance footage from the Mexican border had been found. But like we said, it doesn't make sense for the family to be walking over the border at night without taking essential belongings or even taking cash from their accounts. And the timing was off. The Isuzu was parked in the lot between 5 and 5:30 p.m., but the border footage was time-stamped at 7 p.m. So what did they do for an hour and a half if they parked there? It didn't make sense.
No, nobody had seen them at a restaurant or anything having dinner.
No.
There's a discrepancy there. So it was obvious that the car had been parked to mislead investigators. And it seems to have worked, because even though the bodies had been found, the San Diego Sheriff's Department clung to the belief that the McStays had gone into Mexico.
Yeah, so to me this is just ridiculous. They're saying that they parked there, walked across to Mexico, and then at some point their dead bodies were found in the U.S.
150 miles away.
Right.
Not
Plus
likely.
There's no record of a passport or anything to get back in the U.S. So on November 15th, the San Bernardino Sheriff, law enforcement for the county where the McStays' bodies had been found, took over this investigation. They had almost 3,000 pages of material from the San Diego Sheriff's investigation for them to go over before they could begin their own investigation. Everyone close to the McStay family was interviewed as the case was essentially reinvestigated. And nearly 1 year later, on November 5th, 2014, Chase Merritt was arrested for first-degree murder. And the Sheriff's Department had a press conference to announce his arrest. Now remember, Merritt had been a business associate of Joseph McStay, and he was the last person to see Joseph alive. He said he had met with Joseph for lunch on February 4th, 2010, and that they had just talked about business. And then on April 3rd of 2015, Merritt released a statement to the press where he asserted his innocence. And this was quite a self-serving statement. So I'm going to read it for you now. He wrote, "Thus far, for the most part, I have opted to refrain from releasing statements to the press regarding this case. I have done so as I have not believed that releasing statements to the press would help bring justice to my friend and his family. It is obvious we have a difficult road to travel before justice can be assured. We all feel the gravity of this situation, in that the entire family and its counterparts have experienced a horrific act of depravity. Joseph Summer, Joseph Jr., and little Gianni all are not here to find and see their injustice. Although law enforcement has significantly made errors in their investigation, which will become abundantly clear in the trial, they are the ones who must nonetheless take on this grievous task of finding and bringing justice. I only ask that we all remember in this great country there is the presumption of innocence until proven guilty. It seems that some of us, including law enforcement, have forgotten this very important fact. I only beg the place for this trial is in the courtroom, outside of which the defendant has no right to compel the attendance of witnesses or cross-examine sources of evidence. To do otherwise cannot be redressed by our courts, and therefore the defendant's rights to a fair trial are destroyed. This is an evil which no defendant can contend. My prayer is that through the upcoming trial, and the devotion of all of us, we will come to find the truth, and that the real killer or killers of my friend and his precious family will be exposed. If this is accomplished, I bear no malice." Charles Merritt, April 3rd, 2015. So I'd just like a little bit of your thoughts on that.
Well, if you don't know the outcome of this whole thing, you'd say he's trying to help find the killer of his friend. But it's a very self-serving letter.
Yes, I thought
statement.
so.
He's distancing himself. Wasn't me.
Exactly. And he tried to kind of bring about this idea that he was Joey's best friend, which people who knew the family would say, no, that's not true. And in fact, Summer had quite a dislike for him. You know, she could see that he was just a lying, crappy guy. Right. And, you know, Joey was trying to get rid of him at that point.
Yeah, and despite this wonderful letter, investigators did find documentation that Merritt had a strong motive to murder Joey McStay. For one thing, he had stolen money from Joseph 3 days before they disappeared, Merritt received an email from Joseph McStay with a bill for over $42,000. So what did he do? He accessed Joey's QuickBooks program and wrote checks to himself. Then he denied being responsible. He also said he'd been given a polygraph back in 2010, but had never been told the results by the police.
Well, yeah, back in 2010, Merritt had been interviewed for a CNN special, and he had suggested that Joey's illness from that time may have been related to Summer putting something in his food. And he was kind of clever about the way that he just kind of wove this in as a suggestion. But it's easy to see now that he was trying to mislead people and point at her. He went so far as to say that Joey had told him he might stop eating at home and only eat takeout food. But, all of the McStay's family members and Joey's other friends and business associates really contradicted this story. They didn't believe that Summer would have done anything nefarious. Then Merritt had actually began writing a book which pointed the finger at Summer for her family's disappearance. Prior to the bodies being found, author Rick Baker wrote a book pointing the finger at Summer. He has since retracted his accusations and stopped selling his book, although it's still available on Amazon without his permission.
Okay. So most of the evidence that Merritt in fact killed the McStay family involves Joseph McStay's QuickBooks account and the forged checks that allowed Merritt to take money from Joseph's account. So investigators believe that sometime after meeting with Joey, Merritt killed Joey and the rest of the family because Joey had found out about the thefts and things were going to go badly for him. And he killed them also so that he could steal more of Joey's money.
Yeah, so pretty much just greed. Self-preservation and greed.
Exactly.
On February 4th at 7:59 p.m., someone wrote a check to lowercase Chase Merritt in the amount of $4,000 using Joseph's QuickBooks account. And in the memo line, he wrote regarding Paul Mitchell. Then at 8:05, he deleted the check and he didn't print it. So what prosecutors believed was that this check was practice for a check written by Chase Merritt the next day to himself. Because on February 5th at 12:06 p.m., Chase Merritt wrote a check to Chase Merritt lowercase, again, for $4,500 using Joseph's QuickBooks account, with the same thing in the memo line. He printed it and deleted it from QuickBooks, but then he cashed this check. And we know that he cashed it at a Union Bank at 12:38 p.m. on February 5th. So it's obvious that the person who wrote the check and deleted it on the evening of the 4th was the same person who wrote the check on February 5th, and we know that only Merritt could have written them. So Joseph never used the lowercase Chase Merritt when using his QuickBooks account, so that was something that he added as a new account. And also the checks written after the 4th all had a signature that didn't match Joseph McStay's signature.
Well, so that's kind of suspicious, right?
I think it's more than suspicious, it's damning.
Checks forged by Merritt, because there's more than just that one for $4,500.
No, he kept doing it.
Kept doing it, and these added up to more than $20,000. So then there's some other things that point to Merritt's guilt. One was that the tailpipe of the truck, seen on the neighbor's security footage on the evening of February 4th, didn't match the McStay's Isuzu Trooper. It is, though, as well as markers illuminated on the vehicle, consistent with Merritt's truck.
Yeah, also Merritt's DNA was on the Trooper's steering wheel, the air controls, and the gear shift.
Uh-huh.
And he said he'd never been in that car. Now, Merritt's phone pinged in Mira Loma and later near Rancho Cucamonga on the night of February 4th, 2010, and it was moving in the opposite direction of the Fallbrook home, away from it. So in an interview with detectives, Merritt kept referring to Joseph McStay in the past tense, and they found that suspicious. Although I'm never really sure about that. I don't always know if that means something. But it was weird that he couldn't remember Summer's name in his interview. Even though he'd been at the house a number of times, he'd had dinner with the family, and he had even attended their wedding. So he had to know her name.
You would think he'd know her name.
So that's another attempt at distancing himself.
He also told others that he and Joseph had argued at the lunch meeting. But when he was interviewed by the detectives, he denied an argument. So we've got two different stories there. Then detectives asked him twice if he had ever driven McStay's Isuzu. Both times he said no. Now, on the February 8th, the day that the Isuzu trooper was abandoned near the Mexican border, Merritt's phone pinged nearby at 1:31 p.m., then 1:41 and 1:42. On February 9th, a male calling QuickBooks from Merritt's phone wanted info transferred and then all accounts deleted. And this person claimed to be Joseph McStay.
Yeah, back on February 6th, Merritt had placed 5 calls from his cell phone that pinged a cell tower on Quartzsite Mountain near Victorville, California. That's near where the bodies were found. These were at 11:30, 11:31, 11:33, 11:34, and 11:52 a.m. And this tower is approximately 1.5 miles from the McStay grave site. When questioned, Merritt had said he was not in Victorville on February 6th at all. Merritt was the only one who had said that he and Joey had a lunch meeting on February 4th, and there was no evidence to back up that they were at the Chick-fil-A restaurant, as Merritt had claimed. During the supposed time of the meeting, Joey was online and had called Summer at least 9 times. So that seems unlikely if he was at a meeting with Chase for all this time that he would have been doing that.
Well, for sure.
So investigators believe that Joey had actually ended his business relationship with Merritt, and Merritt had killed him and his family out of revenge and, of course, to get more money.
So his trial wasn't going to begin until July of 2018. It was to be a capital murder case. Now it was postponed just before jury selection because the defense requested more time to complete an investigation they were pursuing. So jury selection began in August of 2018, and the trial was to begin 5 years after the family's bodies had been found, and that would be January of 2019. So it did. It started January 7th, 2019. Prosecution began with motive and an abundance of circumstantial evidence. They started out with the February 1st email from Joseph McStay telling him that he owed him over $40,000. Merritt had been taking money from clients for jobs he wasn't doing. He was gambling away the money, and Joey had finally caught him. They also detailed the checks Merritt had written to himself and how he attempted to delete the program. Now, his attempt to cancel the QuickBooks program had failed because he didn't have access to Joey's master email account. And a detective testified about the checks which were written after the family disappeared that had been backdated to February 4th.
Yeah, a 4-hour police interview with Merritt from just after the family's disappearance was played for the jury. In this interview, Merritt referred to Joseph in the past tense. Documents shown to the jury also showed Merritt's cell phone pings, and that Merritt actually had a sister who lived only a few miles from where the McStays had been buried. So that's suspicious.
Quite.
Merritt's cell phone record showed searches also about how a person can change their identity. Also, despite his claims that he had never been in the McStays' Isuzu, his DNA had been found, right? It was on the steering wheel, the gear shift, and one of the vents. Video surveillance of the vehicle leaving the McStay house on the evening of February 4th had been re-examined, and the characteristics of the vehicle really matched those of Merritt's truck. So I can't help but go back to the initial time of the disappearance, where if they had been more thorough about examining that video and examining the QuickBooks account, they could have caught Merritt much sooner.
Possibly could have.
I mean, it wouldn't have saved the family, but it would have saved their family years and years of torture, really wondering where they were. And it wouldn't have left this murderer free for all those years. These were brutally violent murders done to innocent people, including 2 little kids. It couldn't be determined exactly where or at what time the bludgeoning had happened, because no blood or physical evidence of the beatings were found in the McStay home. But curiously, no towels were found in the home at all, suggesting that a cleanup was done. And unfortunately, Merritt had plenty of opportunities and time to be in that house removing evidence and cleaning. It had been left open.
Wide open. So the defense focused on presenting another possible suspect for the murders, and this was another one of Joey's business associates, Dan Kavanaugh. Kavanaugh had an alibi that he had been in Hawaii at the time of the murders. He had receipts for transactions made with his credit card in Hawaii at the time, and his girlfriend took the stand and swore under oath that Kavanaugh had been with her in Hawaii. Now, the defense entered evidence of Kavanaugh transferring $13,000 from Joey's PayPal account after the family had disappeared. Now, this was easily explained by the prosecution because Kavanaugh had made the transfer with the permission of Joseph McStay's family in order to keep the business going and in order to fulfill orders.
Yeah, even Michael McStay had accessed some of Joey's money so they wouldn't lose the house.
Right.
They were trying to keep things going, thinking he was going to come back. But the defense claimed that the prosecution had withheld evidence that would have helped Merritt's defense. An expert who had analyzed the video surveillance of the vehicle leaving the McStay's cul-de-sac on the evening of February 4th had found some details that may have benefited Merritt, according to the defense attorney. This is what is known as a Brady violation, and based on this, the defense filed a motion to dismiss the charges against Merritt. But prosecutors were able to present an email that they had sent to the defense stating that the expert had not been able to verify the length of the vehicle. So that was it, and the request for dismissal was declined.
So Merritt did not testify in his own defense. Jury deliberation went for a few days, finally returning with a guilty verdict for first-degree murder for each of the McStay family members. Merritt's mother ran out of the courtroom, clearly devastated, and also on the McStay side, most of their family members broke into tears.
So, of course, this is heartbreaking for the McStay family members, but I think you also have to consider, people who were related or trusted Merritt and how this was devastating for them. I mean, imagine being one of his parents. How would you feel to find out your son had done this? It'd be horrific. So not only had this murder affected the McStay's family and friends, it went out to many people. Very damaging.
Oh, it was.
To so many people.
And again, he has a long history, Merritt does, but it's basically petty crime, I guess.
Well, I don't know about petty, but it's money. It's stealing money.
Yeah, it's not murder.
It's not murder. It's not even assault. Nothing like that he was at least, convicted of.
Yeah, so they might be thinking, okay, he's kind of a scumbag, but he's not a killer scumbag.
Yep, there is a difference.
So yeah, it'd be tough for them to wrap themselves around it.
Well, and who would think that anybody would be capable of that? This is just so awful. Really bad.
It is.
And for money, of all things.
So the jury recommended the death penalty for Merritt. San Bernardino County Superior Court Judge Michael Smith upheld the jury's recommendation after a 2-day sentencing hearing, and this included last-minute motions from Merritt's lawyer, who accused prosecutors of misconduct, and they also accused Merritt's earlier attorneys of incompetence, and even had tried to remove the judge from the case. All of these motions were denied.
Yeah, so that's just Merritt's lawyer doing his job. That's what he's supposed to do, or she.
That's right.
So a true piece of shit scumbag who would not only kill a man for money, but his wife and their 2 babies. Now imagine he killed the wife and children because he was afraid of being identified. Although he may have killed Summer out of revenge, it seems that he hated her. But still, he's never admitted to the killings. So, just devil's advocate here. Is there much of a possibility that he could actually be innocent? It was pretty much a circumstantial case.
Well, yeah, although you've got his DNA in the vehicle, the McStay car.
Yeah, and you can't explain that.
And he says he's never been in there, so how do you explain that? You've got the cell phone records. He's in the vicinity of where the bodies were found. He's in the vicinity where the car had been dropped off near the border. And there's lots of things that put him at the scene of the crime.
That's true, yeah.
So I don't think there's much possibility that he's innocent.
No, and I mean, you have to think who else would have a motive to do this. I mean, you can't think of anyone.
Yeah, that was the other one. That was Summer's fault. It was a murder-suicide.
Well, if the bodies hadn't been found, they possibly could have pulled off that theory.
Yeah, but once they find the bodies and find all the injuries that both adults had, there's no way it's a murder-suicide.
Right. Then they know the whole family had been murdered.
Yeah.
I'm just stunned that the San Diego Sheriff's Department was going to cling to the Mexico story after the bodies were found. To me, that's ridiculous.
Well, it's unexplainable.
Well, who is it that said a foolish consistency is the hobgoblin of little minds? Was it Bertrand Russell?
I'll look that up.
Okay. But I just always thought that's a great quote. It really applies here.
It is.
You can't have tunnel vision if you're investigating something like this. So our sources for this episode. A disappeared episode, Mystery on the Border, which originally aired in January of 2011. A CNN special, Who Killed the McStay Family, from 2014. McStay's Taken Too Soon, a book written by Joseph McStay's father, Patrick McStay. No Goodbyes, The Mysterious Disappearance of the McStay Family, by Rick Baker. And that's the one where he's accusing Summer. This is prior to the bodies being found. There's a blog, Chase Merritt and the McStay Family Murders, WordPress site, with some very deep dives and lots of speculation on this case. And the McStay Family Murders, a statement analysis of Chase Merritt's CNN interview by Mark McClish, and that was first posted in December of 2014. TCB's music was written and produced by Tristan Capel. If you haven't joined Tie Grabber, that's cool, but if you ever decide you're interested in getting some more TCB and offering some support to the show, we do have some good stuff coming up for you. So what have we got coming up in February, Dick?
We have another doctor who went on the wrong side of the tracks here. This is Anthony Pignataro, who was found guilty of negligent homicide in the death of a patient he was doing breast implants on. And he served time and then decided to pick on his wife a little bit. I'll leave it at that.
But he actually did make it through med school.
Yes.
So he wasn't a dummy. He was just a psycho.
He definitely was.
Okay. These commercial-free members-only episodes come out each month, and we have a backlog of over 40 episodes that are all yours to listen to as soon as you sign up. Some recent episodes that you might enjoy are the story of Sheila Davalu, the murder of Josh Hilberling, the kidnapping of Shannon Matthews, and the list goes on and on. There are also some older ones I think are quite good, like The Crimes of Robert Raldan, the O.J. Simpson series, the honor killing of Jesse Sidhu. There's just a lot of stuff out there if you have some time to kill. You can be a Tie Grabber member for as little as $4 a month, too. And when you join, you get a Welcome to the Brewery gift, which we send along with a nice handwritten thank you note. So just go to tiegrabber.com, click on subscribe if you want to learn more. Other ways to give us some support are to rate us on iTunes or wherever you listen. These ratings are actually pretty important to expand our listener base, so we really appreciate those. You can also do some shopping on our website, tiegrabber.com. Buy yourself some stickers or a shirt or any kind of thing with our logo on it. Pretty much everything is out there. So we're ready to move on to feedback. If you have a case suggestion or comments about a crime or a beer, please send us a voicemail or an email. We do have a widget on our website. It's on the right side of the screen, and you can click on that and record your message. Another way to send us a voicemail is just to record your message on your voice memo function on your phone, paste it into an email, and send it to us at truecrimebrewery@tiegrabber.com. We really do love to hear from our listeners, and that's why we started our newsletter. We put out the first one in January, and now we're going to start gathering some stuff up to have a better one in April. But I hope that you've enjoyed the one that I sent out for January. If you signed up, you can sign up to get the newsletter as well on our website. So for this newsletter, I'm inviting our listeners to submit short articles, reviews and opinions on true crime books or true crime movies and documentaries you've watched or read, and maybe there's a crime that's affected your life or just really has kind of changed the way you see certain aspects of things. Or maybe there's a true crime book that changed your opinion about a crime or a notorious criminal. We'd love to read whatever you have to share with us and share it in turn with all of our other TCB community members. We also have a contest now. It's the same one we had 3 years ago that was very popular, and this is the beer review contest. We'll run this contest for 2 to 3 months depending on the response, and all you need to do is record yourself reviewing one of your favorite beers, just as Dick does in the beginning of each of our shows. The submissions will be judged on personality, on details, and overall charm of the review. Do you have any suggestions on how to do a good beer review, Dick?
Drink a lot of beer. Practice.
And where can people learn more about beer to make it more detailed? Just by listening to us, or are there other ways?
Well, there's all sorts of ways. I mean, there's plenty of beer sites.
Yes.
Untapped, Rate Beer, Beer Advocate. There's plenty of places to find beer reviews and how to rate beers.
But probably the most enjoyable way is just to visit different breweries and talk to the people there. They're very knowledgeable.
They certainly are.
And audio quality of these beer reviews will not be judged, so don't worry if you don't have any recording equipment. Just a simple voicemail or memo recording is great. And I'm going to have a really good prize for this because I want to give away a pair of my favorite Bluetooth earbuds for podcast listening to our winner. And I'll give out more details about that in the upcoming weeks as entries come in. So we really look forward to your beer reviews. Last time we did this, it was a lot of fun. We got to play them on the show.
It was. There were some really great reviews.
Yeah.
Okay, we're going to go to feedback now. I got you a few voicemails to listen to today, Jill.
That's very exciting.
3 of them. The first one's from Debbie, and she's just offering some comments.
Hey, Jill and Dick. This is Debbie from Birmingham, UK. I live in Sturchley, better known as just behind the Cadbury's factory. And let's be honest, we do have the best chocolate in the world. I'm not going to ask you for a case suggestion because everything you do is absolutely fantastic. I've listened to so many of your cases, and 3/4 of the way through I've realised this is a case I've listened to on other true crime podcasts, but you've brought it from such a different angle and looked at so many different things. I've not recognised it to begin with. Just please keep on what you're doing. Beer, Dick, wow. Where I live, tiny suburb in Birmingham in the UK, we have 4 breweries, craft ale breweries, 2 real ale bars, a cocktail bar, and a cracking local pub. You would be amazed at what you could get here in Sturchley. We are truly, truly spoiled. Jill, you would love it too, because 2 of the pubs, actually, let's be honest, and 2 of the breweries have sours on all the time. Just keep on doing what you're doing, guys. I'm absolutely in love with your podcast. It's the only podcast I've now listened to in the last 2-3 months, and that's after following about half a dozen regularly. So thank you. Keep on going. I'm really, really enjoying it. I'm up to June 2019 on my podcast binge, and I'm sure by the time this message hopefully gets put on air, I'll have caught up. So thank you once again. Take care.
Well, thanks, Debbie. What can I say? Just super nice things to say, and I really appreciate it.
Yeah, and it's not excessively laudatory, so
okay.
It's tempered a little bit. But yeah,
very nice.
It was a nice little note. If we ever get to the Isle of Great Britain, we'll have to look up her place, her pubs and stuff.
Yeah, great accent.
Okay, next one is from Lisa, and she has a case suggestion, and I believe there's a beer suggestion in there too. So let's see.
Hi, Jill and Dick. I really am enjoying your tie grabber specials, and I'm looking forward to my snifter arriving in the mail. Today I'd like to just let you know about a crime. Maybe you've heard about it. It's about realtor Lindsay Buziak. She was murdered on February 2, 2008, and so it's coming up to the anniversary of her death, and her father always has a walk in remembrance of her to try and get the case back up. There's been no clues. They feel it was a professional killing. She was showing a house to a woman and in the $1 million bracket, and it turned out that 2 people arrived. Her boyfriend Jason was supposed to be sort of on the lookout for her outside, but he got there a little late, and there's been a lot of discussion about the Zalios to do with this crime. It's a very sad case. There was no evidence, no fingerprints, nothing. So they feel it was a professional hit or whatever. But yeah, it's really quite interesting. It's just so bizarre that they haven't been able to find any clues about this, and my heart really goes out to the family. There's a few cases in Victoria that have been disappearances. If you look at the missing people, there's so many in the island here. For a beer, I would suggest anything from the Whistle Boy Brewing. It's a local brewery. Whistle Boy, B-O-Y. I would suggest the Rainy Saison. It's got cracked pepper and fruit, and the hops are Mosaic and Azteca, giving it layers of mango, papaya, blueberry, and tangerine. So anyways, take care. I really enjoy your show.
Thanks, Lisa. So, yeah, we're kind of familiar with that case. We saw, was it a Dateline we saw on the Lindsay Buziak case?
We watched something about the case.
And really no clues at all, right? She had been called by someone who wanted to be shown a house, someone with kind of a foreign accent.
Right. She got a phone call. This is a cold call. Somebody had called up and said, I need to buy a house as soon as possible. I'm going to pay cash. She wanted $1 million home. So Lindsay thought this was a little weird and wasn't sure she wanted to do anything about it. But her boyfriend, who worked in the same realty office, said, go ahead. I'll make sure I'm outside waiting so nothing will happen to you. He was there, but he was running a little late, so he got there too late for Lindsay. People have noticed, or people have testified, that there were a couple that were seen leaving the house. I remember from the show we watched, there was a distinctive outfit that the woman was wearing.
Right, yeah.
But they don't have a clue.
So has the boyfriend been ruled out?
No, but
okay.
They don't think he's involved, although one part I read that he's been cooperative, except that he has not given his DNA.
But any DNA that would be on her from him would be explainable anyway.
Right, unless there's something in the house. But
well, it really is a mystery.
It's a total mystery.
Because if it was a professional hit, who would want to do that to this 24-year-old real estate agent?
There's something about some drug dealings, not that she was involved, but that she was aware of some drug deals or something, and that there's a theory that she was killed to prevent her from testifying.
Yeah, that seems kind of strange.
It's a stretch.
Yeah.
But I thought at the time we saw the TV program that it would be an interesting case, and once I've looked at it a little bit more after Lisa suggested it, yeah, I think that'd be something we'd like to try doing.
All right, so we'll look into that some more. What can you say about the beer? Sounded good.
Well, saisons are like that. I think Lisa's practicing for her beer review for the contest.
Yeah.
But yeah, saisons tend to be a little peppery, spicy, that type of thing. They're quite good.
Okay, we have one more voicemail today.
One more voicemail. This is from Allison, and it's another case suggestion.
Hello, Dick and Jill. Happy Tuesday. Tuesdays are always wonderful days because I get to listen to a new episode, which I just did. So thank you for keeping that up and putting those wonderful episodes out. I look forward to them every week, always counting down to Tuesday. Well, my name is Allison, and I have a case suggestion for you. I'm suggesting this case because I'd love to get your medical view on it. I think that will make it really interesting. Plus, it's a murder in the family, which you always seem to make those cases so interesting and do them really well. So the case is in 2013, the case of Diane and Rachel Stout in Springfield, Missouri. They are a mother and daughter killing team, which began annihilating their family. And the interesting thing is they killed the husband and a son, or a brother, dad and brother, and those were both originally deemed deaths of another cause. I think it was a heart attack and a seizure. And then they went after one of the other girls in the family. Her name was Sarah, who was hospitalized. And that's when they were caught that they were poisoning family members with antifreeze and murdering them one after the other. If they hadn't have been caught, the youngest daughter, who was 12, I think, would have been next, they said. So quite evil, and I'd love to hear your take on it. I don't have a beer review. I'm sorry. I am still clinging to my Mike's Hard Lemonades. But Dick, your beer reviews are so poetic and well done that you're every week driving me closer and closer to trying a beer. So keep at it. Maybe someday you'll bring me over to your side. Thank you so much for your hard work. I look forward to next Tuesday.
Yeah, I like this because we don't often have mother-daughter or parent-child killing teams.
No, that's really bizarre and evil.
It seems from the little bit of research I've done that the mother, Diane, was the lead guiding force of this plot, and she recruited her daughter, Rachel, who apparently was a willing helper. But they did eventually get caught. Diane entered an Alford plea, and that's where you admit that the evidence is overwhelming, but you're not actually pleading guilty. And she was sentenced to life without parole. Rachel testified against her mother. She got a sentence of 2 life terms with the possibility of parole after 42 years. So she's basically in jail for the rest of her life.
So Rachel didn't get any kind of deal really for testifying.
Well, she got the possibility of parole, which her mother didn't get. But otherwise, it doesn't look like a real sweetheart deal for her testifying against her mother, right?
No, not at all. Well, thanks, Allison. Great suggestion.
We'll have to look at that.
Yeah, I've had a few Mike's Hard Lemonades in my time. Nothing wrong with that. What have we got for emails?
We have a couple. I've got a case suggestion from Monica. Monica says, I've been listening about a year and love your show and the way you guys interact with each other. I live in a suburb of Chicago, and I wonder if you could ever do a show on a little girl named Gianni Nicarico, who was murdered by a serial killer named Brian Dugan back in 1983. Monica says, I have a personal interest in this case as my little sister was attacked by this guy when she was 11, but she got away from him.
Wow.
Now, the story takes a weird twist with 3 men being arrested for the murder of Gianni, spending many years in jail, even after Dugan gets put in jail for other rapes and murders. And he says he'll confess as long as he doesn't get the death penalty. Fascinating.
Yeah, I've never heard of this.
I looked up some stuff, and I hope I can find a lot more. So this guy Dugan was in custody for the rape and murder of 2 other people, an adult woman and a young girl. And he kind of informally confessed to the murder of Gianni Nicarico. However, at this time, 3 other men had been found guilty of that crime. Now, even though Dugan said, yes, I did it, these guys stayed in jail. They finally got released from jail and absolved in the year 2000. And then by 2005, Dugan had been charged with the murder. The trial went on in 2009. He pled guilty, was sentenced to death, and this was later commuted to life in prison. So that's where he is. Sounds like an interesting case.
It does. Thanks a lot for your suggestion, Monica. We'll definitely look into that one. Our next email is from Stacy. It's another case suggestion. Stacy writes, I found your podcast about a month ago and have been binge listening. I work from home, so it helps my day go by faster. I've been trying to find the number to call and leave a voicemail, but have been unable to do so because I wanted to give a case suggestion. This particular case is close to home as I work directly with the person. In 1995, I lived and worked in Nashville, Tennessee as a waitress at Shoney's restaurant on Donaldson Pike. There I worked late nights to early mornings, and one of the cooks who worked with me was a man by the name of Paul Dennis Reed. He was a muscular and tall man who had a joyful personality. He was always joking and smiling with employees. I remember him flirting with me and the other ladies who worked there. I worked at Shoney's for a few months before leaving my job. Several months after I quit, I sat in my living room and a breaking story came on the local news. And Paul's picture flashed on the screen. He had been arrested and charged with a string of serial killings in and around Nashville. He was actually apprehended after trying to kidnap and likely kill my ex-boss, Mitch Robertson, who had just fired him. Paul was found to have been targeting fast food restaurants, and he would brutally kill the employees, execution style, then rob the store of all the money, change included. He murdered 7 victims that authorities know of, but is suspected of murdering more. His case is very interesting, beginning with his childhood, where he would put tacks into his grandmother's food trying to kill her, among other cruel and unusual behaviors. There are actually a couple of shows on the case that have aired on A&E and the ID channel. He was dubbed the fast food killer. There was also a book that was written about the case titled When Nashville Bled. I personally spoke with the author and gave her my story. She changed my name in the book to protect my identity. I think Paul was an extremely disturbed individual whose abusive childhood set him on a path of becoming a monster. Paul died in prison at the age of 55. I think that you will find this case very interesting, and I would enjoy hearing your take on it. Well, thanks, Stacy. If you ever do want to leave a voicemail, go to tygrabber.com, and there's a little tab on the right side that says Leave a Voicemail. If you click on that and you have your microphone on your computer, you can just talk right to your computer or your phone, whatever you're using, and that will be recorded and sent to us. So I hope that makes sense. But thanks for the case suggestion. It sounds really pretty fascinating to me.
Yeah, I mean, there's a little bit of stuff I read about this guy. There are at least 3 other fast food places that he had robbed and killed people.
Yeah, but Stacy could have been a victim, right? It's pretty scary.
She could have been.
But I think your first tip-off should have been that he used 3 names, Paul Dennis Reed. That's usually the sign of a serial killer.
And you've studied this in depth?
No,
This
just
is just,
you know.
Everybody knows this. This is common knowledge.
Well, a lot of them are, right? No, he probably just went by Paul Reed, and then when he was found out to be a serial killer, they called him Paul Dennis Reed.
Yeah, because all the other Paul Reeds didn't want to be associated with him.
Yeah, I'm wondering if that's why they do it. That would make sense. Anyway, just joking about that, but this sounds like an interesting case.
It does. So we'll look into that.
Okay, thanks, Stacy.
Thank you.
And thanks to everyone for listening and sharing your feedback with us. We certainly appreciate it. And we'll see you next week.
We'll be here at the quiet end.
At the quiet end. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Burp.